Hi everyone, it's Emma from MSC Makes, and this is my beginner's sock knitting series where I'm going to be showing you how to knit a pair of simple socks using the magic loop technique. In this episode, I'm going to be showing you how to cast on your stitches, how to work the cuff of the sock and how to work the leg. And I'll pop chapters throughout so that you can skip ahead or skip backwards as needed. To get started, you're going to need some sock yarn and some sock needles. I'm using Higher Sharps. They are 2.25 millimeters and the cable length is 80 centimeters. I've got two pairs of these. I've got this 80 centimeter pair and another pair that has 100 centimeter cable. Both of those are great, but I wouldn't recommend going above that or below that size as it can be a little bit tricky to handle. For this tutorial, I'm going to be using this beautiful yarn here from Beth at Beehive Yarns. The colourway is Citrine and Sunstone, but you can use any sock yarn. It doesn't have to be hand dyed. Just make sure that it is specified as being sock yarn and that it's 4-ply. So I'm going to be making my pair of socks with a contrasting cuff. So I've got my contrasting colour here and I'm going to cast on 64 stitches with the long tail cast on method. If you're already comfortable with how to do that, you can skip ahead to the next part, but I'll be going through how to do that technique now. So you want to take your yarn and you want to get yourself a good length because we're going to be casting on all of our stitches with this, and it's always better to have a bit too much left over than to run out part way through. So I'm going to make a slip knot and I'm going to pop that on one of my needles there as so. And what you want to do is taking my left hand here, I'm going to make this pincer shape, and that's going to come in between the two strands here. So I've got the strand of yarn that's attached to the ball to the back and the strand of yarn that's loose to the front. So I've got my thumb and finger in between there, and I'm going to bring the rest of my fingers around and I'm going to grab the rest of the yarn. So what you should find is you're holding the yarn here, and then the front of the yarn and the back strand there is going over your thumb and finger. And you just want to have a bit of a practice sort of doing this backwards and forward swinging motion here, because that's what we're going to do to work our stitches. So I'm using my index finger here to pop onto my slip knot to keep it nice and secure and stop it moving. We're going to bring our thumb to the left like this. Our needle is going to come underneath this strand here and up, and then we're going to rotate our hand, bring our thumb to the right and our finger to the left, and we're going to bring our needle to the back and underneath that strand, and then we're going to take our thumb back to the left so that our needle comes through that loop, and then we're going to let go and then just pull on that end of the yarn there to secure it. And now we've made our first stitch. So I'll show you how to do that again. So thumb and finger come in between. The strand of our yarn that's not attached to anything comes over our thumb. The yarn attached to the ball goes to the back. We bring our thumb to the left. We bring our needle tip down and through. And then we keep our needle there, and then we move our thumb to the right and our finger to the left. Our needle goes around the back and underneath, and then we bring our thumb back to the left so that our needle goes through that loop, and then we let go and pull on that strand at the front there to tighten it up. And it's really tempting to pull really securely and tightly on those stitches, and you do want them to be secure, but you don't want to pull too tightly because it's going to make them very difficult to work into. And we're just going to repeat that, and once you've done it a few times you'll start to get into a really good rhythm. So I'll talk you through it again. So thumb to the left, needle tip down, under and through, thumb to the right and finger to the left, needle goes down and underneath, and then you bring it back through that loop and then tighten the stitch up. Then we've got 4 stitches. So again, thumb to the left, needle down and through the middle, finger to the left, and then our needle goes down from the back, underneath and back through that loop. and you want to keep repeating that until you've got a total of 64 stitches on your needle, and you'll find that that will fit a medium-sized woman's foot. If you want to make a smaller sock or a larger sock, you can increase or decrease that amount of stitches, and you need to do so in increments of 4. So we're casting on 64 stitches. For a slightly smaller sock, you'd want to do 60. For a larger sock, you'll want to do 68, and so on. So I'm going to cast on my 64 stitches, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you how to divide them into the front and back needles ready to begin our magic loop. So I've now cast on all 64 of my stitches, and it's really important to make sure that this isn't twisted in any way. So for example, if that was like that, you want to go from the beginning here where our yarn's still attached and just go backwards. Make sure that all the stitches are nice and straight and not twisted on the needles. Then what I like to do is turn my needle like this, and we're going to divide the stitches across the front and the back needles. So what I like to do is just push them all across here, and then just count from this end so that we've got 32. And then obviously if you've cast on more or less stitches, it's just half of whatever amount you cast on. So my 32 stitches is here. I'm just going to use my thumbnail there to secure them. I'm just going to push everything back a moment because I want those stitches to go onto the cable. And then what I'm going to do is pop the cable through that gap like so. We push these stitches back onto the needle here. These ones on the cable, we're going to pull the cable through whilst holding them nice and securely. It just stops them getting as twisted, and we pop that onto this needle here. And if you've cast on too tightly, you'll find this a little bit tricky because they won't want to move. So what you should find you've got is 32 stitches on the back needle, 32 stitches on the front needle here. It's worth just taking a moment just to hold the two needles together and check that they're not twisted at all. All of this cast on edge here should all be at the bottom. There should be no twists or anything like that. And we want the side that's still attached to our yarn ball here to be at the back. And what we're going to do is find the strand of yarn that's still attached to the ball. This one we can ignore. I ended up with quite a long tail. This one we can ignore for now because we're not going to be using it anymore. I'm going to take this, and it's really important that you do is to make sure that it goes back over the needle like this. Otherwise, when you start knitting, you're going to end up with an extra stitch. I'm going to hold the needles together securely like this. This back needle, I'm going to grab, and I'm going to pull it out like this, and I'm still using my thumb and my finger here just to keep hold of those stitches and keep them securely and in place. And then we're simply going to start knitting. So for this sock, I'm going to knit 10 rounds using a 2x2 rib. So that means we're going to knit 2 and then purl 2. So I'm going to bring my needle through this first stitch here. And then what I like to do is just get my middle finger and pinch that cable there and hold it as close as I can to the needle here, the needle tip, and then that will stop, or it will help stop a ladder forming. And then we're just going to knit into that stitch. And again into the next stitch. And I think the first round that you do is probably the hardest. After this it gets a lot easier. And then I'm going to purl 2, and we're just going to continue working along the row, knitting 2 and purling 2, and I'll just bring that closer so that you can see. And we're just going to do that all along the row. So I'm going to continue knitting, and then when we reach the end of the row, I'll come back and I'll show you how to work the other side. So you're basically going to be working the front of the sock and then the back of the sock. So I've just worked across my first side here. So all 32 stitches. These stitches that are on the cable at the back here, we've not yet worked. And what we're going to do is take this needle and turn like this, so that these are at the back. And then same as before, we're going to take this yarn that's attached to the ball and we're just going to pop it over the back of the needle like this. And then what I'm going to do is just same as we did last time, is just hold these stitches securely. We're going to drop this needle and we're going to pull and then pop these front stitches back onto that needle. Like so. And then we're going to do exactly the same. So I'm just holding them secure. We're going to take the back needle with the yarn looped over the top, and I'm just going to pull it out so that those stitches sit on the cable now. And we're just going to start working. Remember to use your middle finger to pinch that cable as close as you can to the needle tip to stop that ladder forming. And we're just going to knit 2 and purl 2 all the way across the rest of the stitches. And once you've done that, you'll have worked your first round, and after that it gets a lot easier because the stitches will just be a bit easier to work into and you'll start to be able to see what you're doing a bit more. So I'm going to work across this row now, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how to do the next round. So I've just knit across those stitches now. So we've now completed our first round and our knitting is actually joined. Don't worry if yours looks like this and it's got quite a big gap. That will tighten up as you knit more rounds. Do not worry. And we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're just going to flip our needle around like this and pinch everything together here to stop them from sliding off, and just pull that cable through. And you should find that now that you've knit your first round, that's actually much easier to do. So you might find it helpful at this point to pop some sort of stitch marker through the front of the stitches here so that you know where your beginning of round is. So if the front of the sock is facing you with the ball of yarn attached here on the right ready to begin, then you know that you're at the beginning of the round. I don't use a stitch marker because I know that if this yarn tail here, which is not the one attached to the wool, the one that we used for our cast on, I know that if that is on the right hand side, that I'm at the beginning of my round. If it's at the left hand side away from our working yarn, I know that I'm halfway through. So we're just going to continue in that same way. So I'm going to show you how to do it one more time. So remember, take our working yarn, it needs to come over the back of our needle like this. If you leave it down just hanging through like this, you're going to be creating an extra stitch when you start knitting. So always make sure that that is looped over the back of the needle like this. Grab hold of all your stitches, take that back needle and pull it through like this so that those stitches are resting on the cable, ready to start working across this front needle. And then we're going to do exactly the same. We're going to knit 2 and purl 2 all the way across. Now, lots of people struggle with ladders, which is where you get a gap in your knitting here along the join. I find that that's something that does just get better with practice. I think sometimes it can be tempting to try and overcompensate and really pull those stitches tightly, that first stitch, which can actually have the adverse effect and make the ladder look worse. So just try and keep everything nice and relaxed. Remember that trick I told you about using your finger to pinch the cable as close to the tip of the needle as possible, and you should find that you don't really have much of a ladder there, if at all. And I'm just going to work across the rest of this row, and I'm going to show you just one more time what we do again. So I've just reached the end of the row, and I'm just going to turn everything like this and drop that needle, hold everything securely and pull that cable back so that the stitches can go back onto the needle like this. And I know now that I'm halfway through this round because this tail end of the yarn is on the left, but my working yarn here is on the right. So I know that if that's on the left, that I'm halfway through a round. And just remember again, bring that yarn over the top and then work along those stitches in the same way. And we're going to do that for a total of 10 rounds, so that we've got 10 rounds of 2x2 ribbing. So I'm going to continue now working the rest of the cuff, and then I'll meet you back to show you what to do next. So I've just finished working my cuff now. I've done 10 rounds in total. Because I'm only making a pair of shorty socks, 10 rounds is enough. If you were making a pair of socks with a longer leg, I'd recommend you do 12 to 15 rounds depending on your own personal preference. I'm going to turn around, ready to begin the next row. And because I'm doing the contrasting cuff, I'm actually going to start knitting the leg in this lovely colour here. So I'm going to snip this off ready, and I'm going to show you how we can knit that ending as we go. If you are not bothering with the contrast cuff and you're just knitting your sock all in one colour, obviously there's no need there to snip the yarn off. So what I'm going to do is make sure that this yarn's up and over out of the way again, pull out that back needle as we have been doing, and I'm going to pop my needle through the first stitch there ready. I'm going to grab the end of my yarn and just loop that round, leaving a nice long tail there so we can weave that in. And I'm just going to knit that one to secure it. I'm going to pop the needle in the next stitch, and then what I'm going to do here is take the end of the contrast colour and just grab a hold of it there. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring it a bit closer so you can see, is loop that over the needle like so. I'm going to bring the other yarn round as if to knit. Just let that one fall away and then knit that stitch. Then I'm going to knit the next stitch as normal. And then again, I'm going to pop that needle through. I'm going to take this yarn at the back here, lay it over the top like this, wrap our working yarn around as if to knit, and let that other one fall. The next stitch, just knit as normal. So again, pop your needle through, lay that yarn over, wrap the working yarn around to knit, let that other one fall. And it's important that you knit a stitch afterwards as normal, because that is what actually grabs our yarn. And if I show you the back here, you can see how that yarn has been caught as we've been knitting. And I'm going to continue doing that just for a couple more times. If you're not happy with this technique, you can absolutely just sew the ends in at the end as you would normally. You can just let that yarn tail hang down out the way for now. I like to do this method because it just means that at the end it minimises the ends that I have to sew in. And I've finished weaving that in now, so I can just continue knitting along that round. So I'm going to continue knitting across this row. I'll show you just as a little reminder what we do when we come to the end again. But we're basically, this is the very easy part of the sock, is knitting the leg and the foot, because it's just plain knitting. This is why I love knitting socks, because they make great TV knitting. They're really portable, so they're good for waiting rooms, just any opportunity really. So I've reached the end of that row. Just as we were doing before, I'm going to flip my knitting over, and it should be getting a little bit easier now because we've got something more to hang on to here. And I'm just going to pull these stitches back onto the needle at the front. Again, this is here on the left hand side, so we know that that means we've got to work across the second half of the round. And I'm going to do that now. So we'll just continue knitting until the end of the round, and we're simply going to do this now for a total of 16 rounds. So it can be really handy to have a row counter or even just a pen and paper so that you can keep a tally of how many rows that you've been working. So I've just completed my first round now with our main colour, and we've got a little bit of a gap going on here. So what it can help to do is, if you have chosen to weave this ending as you go, is to just give this yarn tail a very gentle pull, and you'll find that it will close that gap a little bit for you. And then I just like to grab that tail and just pull it through the bottom and out the bottom of the sock there, so it's out of the way. And then we're going to do exactly the same thing with this yarn tail here, which is the one for the main colour, and we're just going to continue knitting our way around the sock for a total of 16 rounds. Once you've worked all 16 rounds of the leg, you should find your sock is beginning to look like this, and that actually marks the end of this first episode. In the next episode, I'll be showing you how to work the heel flap and gusset. So I hope you found this helpful, and I'll see you again soon. Bye everyone.